Let's do it. Perfect. All right, we'll start off with the review of the business session agenda. And we will be going through the review and discussion of proposed zoning text amendment ZTA to allow an employee suite in commercial zones. And we will, in the business session today, we will be going through the general plan water chapter and consent agenda from November 5th. And it should be a pretty fast meeting tonight. So looking forward to that. So let's start off with the business agenda.
Okay, so we've got the water chapter. I think we were hoping to go through the employee text amendment, the employee suite text amendment first.
Okay.
Just so that we don't take up all of our time on the water stuff, because we could talk about that for a long time probably. So
Perfect.
I'll turn it over to Sheldon or
Yes, give me like 1 sec. Sorry,
I'm just going to join and walk through that with us. So we did notice though, or realize that with the water chapter, we have to do a public hearing for that. But I don't know if we met the state statute for the noticing requirement for that, which is annoying because they have different criteria for a general plan change versus any other type of a thing. So we may have to table it and formally do the public hearing at another meeting and then take it back to the council.
So how will that work, given that this is due to the state, right?
Well, it's not due to the state. I'll talk to them and just tell them that it's more of a formality type of a thing. But I think if we could just even capture the minutes that everyone agrees and is ready to forward it, but due to that nuance, we can't formally approve anything until that happens.
Yeah.
So just so that they know we're actively in process and that it's not
Forgot.
like we're not in consensus or ready to do that. Was that kind of what you gathered?
Yeah, I look at the code and just said, just even though you're an administrative body, that's a legislative decision you're making. It's part of a legislative decision, the recommendation, therefore it has to be noticed during that meeting. So
Does that mean our meeting has to be noticed or the council's meeting where it's approved has to be noticed?
Progress.
The planning commission meeting has to be noticed, because that was something like today I was like, well, could we just do the public hearing at the council instead? But state code requires that the planning commission have that as part of the meeting. So anyway, you ready, Emma?
Yeah, I'm in now. Thanks for
let's do
waiting,
it.
everybody. Okay. Let me just share really fast here. Okay, always thinks for a second. Sorry. 2 seconds, always.
Sorry, didn't see you come in.
All right, there we go. Okay, so this is just a proposed text amendment. Text amendment is related to adding an employee suite section within our code. So that would be as an accessory use within certain commercial zones. This would be a better way to accommodate businesses that require an on-site employee to respond to after-hours needs. Right now, the city does allow for a caretaker's or guard's residence as a conditional use only in the ORD zone, but this proposed text amendment would be broader and would apply to more zones than just ORD. And then Sheldon and I worked on creating a draft definition of what employee suite might mean. And this is that definition. So employee suite means a residential living space located entirely within the principal building and intended exclusively for occupancy by an employee of the business or organization operating on the property. The purpose of an employee suite is to provide on-site living accommodations for staff responsible for after-hours operations, emergency response, security, or other duties requiring presence outside normal business hours. An employee suite is not permitted in an accessory building or detached structure. Such suites must remain accessory to the principal use, may contain no more than one kitchen, and may be occupied by the designated family or the designated employee and their immediate family. We provided a little bit more information within the packet, but as a rough overview, the proposed employee suite standards would include, that would be, they're included in the definition, but they'd be accessory to the principal use, located entirely within the existing structure. For single family occupancy only, only allow for a single kitchen, not allow for additional accessory living spaces. Be subordinate to the principal use and size, so and no larger than 1,200 square feet. Compatible architecturally with the existing building. Occupied only by an employee or subcontractor of the entity operating the principal use in their immediate family. And then just that they would meet all other construction, fire, safety standards. And so the staff found that some similar proposed text amendment would provide flexibility for businesses with sort of emergency response needs or operational needs. It also allow limited residential occupancy in commercial zones without preventing impacts associated with full residential use. This would also ensure that all suites meet strict building and fire safety standards while maintaining the commercial character of the zones through size limits, occupancy restrictions, and architectural integration. That being said, we just had some things for the planning commission to consider. So we kind of brought up some of the questions Sheldon and I had as we were thinking about this text amendment, and would love to hear some of your input. So just whether it should be restricted to certain zoning districts, based on the principal land use, whether occupancy should only be the employed individual, or if it could include family, whether they need a separate business license, need to be a full-time employee, whether there should be required parking, whether it needs to be internal to the principal structure, and then whether it should be a conditional or a permitted use. And yeah, we're just, we'd love to hear any feedback you might have.
Do you want to provide a little history on how this originated?
Yes,
To help frame the context, because there's a specific
yeah,
case
no, that's
that
great.
drove this conversation, so.
Yeah, there's like I think it's a veterinarian's clinic in the area here. It sounds like they do have some sort of ensuite living area for one of their employees, because I think that they bring in, it sounds like they have brought in an employee from outside of the city, I think,
Yeah,
to
it's
stay
a
there.
Resident better that.
Yeah, so they've been living there full time and also taking care of animals and other emergencies in the nighttime. But I think they got reported, right? I think it's a
Yes.
code violation case. And so just trying to see if it makes sense within Cottonwood Heights to allow for situations like that where the
Yeah.
employees want to live.
The purpose they have that living space because they hire some like pets, the doctor just for an out of state for like an intern. And they try to provide some living space for those kind of intern students. So they're probably here for like 6 months or a year, it depends on how long they're intern. But like our residents, I'm concerned why have people keep like, they think they do kind of rental things, but after code enforcement go clears is, oh, they're just for the doctor intern, they have a space to stay. But we also clarify they doesn't have any like overnight emergency pet care, those kind of, they just provided kind of like a living space for those intern students.
Is there a timeline associated with this? 30 days, 6 months, et cetera?
So as it's written, it would be just as long as that person's fully, is a full-time employee of that business.
Okay. So there can be someone occupying this facility 24/7 every day of the year. Okay.
Correct.
Got it.
Spin back a couple slides.
Yeah, tell me when to stop.
Still late, so yeah.
Oh, sorry, okay. We go forward more.
No, forward now. So the question is really, I think about how you would abuse this.
Yeah.
So only one suite is allowed per lot or principal use. So pick a situation, this is kind of radical, I know, but like a storage facility. Each one of those facilities is leased by an individual business. In theory, each one of those could house a full-time employee of the business leasing that space. Office warehouse is a little better example, but where you have kind of a condominiumized situation where on a single lot, you have multiple businesses. Would this apply only to one business on the lot? Or to each of those condominiumized?
Right, so how, as it's written, it would be, I guess, each use within that, I guess, or each structure that has a different unit, right, within that development, they would be allowed to have an employee suite.
So in the case of like self-storage, you could have someone living in each
Well,
storage unit.
well, in general, that's one singular use, and that's where the caretaker dwelling ordinance comes into effect. Is that it, you know, that's what that ordinance was written for, is for, you know, permanent residence or residency for storage units or like guard shacks on private roads.
But in the case of a self-storage place, the whole facility would be considered the principal use. So it's not that each unit is a separate business. The whole business is the self-storage facility. So that would be the principal use.
How about if you picked a strip mall?
Then
A single parcel strip mall, is that kind of what you're thinking?
Like a condominiumized strip
Yeah.
mall.
With each, I mean, with several businesses in a strip mall. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that could probably be viewed as qualifying. So, and that's where we could narrow it down to say, is it limited to certain zones, even to certain uses? Say this would be allowed for, as an accessory use for a vet clinic, medical clinic, a hospital, you know, storage facility, whatever uses we think would be appropriate for that. I don't know if a retail store would need someone on site at night.
You have this kind of man cave trend that's going on right now,
Yeah,
which, you know, you get a big commercial space, you live in it and you do your business or hobby, whatever the case may be, out of it. I'm just trying to see if this would prevent that or prohibit that or permit it.
I think with this business license, I think would need to be associated to prevent that truly. Because I think if we are looking at business licenses, if it is a strip mall, that's a single parcel, single owner, but it's not condominium, it's not a condom,
Wow.
condominium,
Yeah.
not a condom.
Open.
But if you look at that from the standpoint of if it is a single owner parcel and you have 10 different business licenses to it, I think if we looked at different zones that are associated with it, I think one of the main things we could look at is if there's a veterinary clinic and a hospice or veterinary clinic, you know, whatever the facilities or uses would be acceptable under this. I think that would be a way to prevent it because I believe most of the man cave zonings in the state of Utah, it's a residential zoning it's either a residential zoning or it's a commercial zoning with an overlay for residential use. Just, you know, Park City, Wasatch County have those currently being utilized. So I think that's something that we would want to look at, but
Business license is a pretty low barrier.
yeah.
and
like
maybe,
that's-
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, and maybe we want to start out on this with limiting it to certain, to vets or medical or something, instead of opening it up real broadly to, because we can always go back and it can be amended and updated. And I was also going to ask about parking. Because clearly if one person or if it's a family, they could take up 5 or 6 parking spots and then that then means the business would need to increase how many parking spots they have for customers. So I think that
So I
something
guess the
to,
question is, would we, I guess, have an additional requirement for them to provide additional parking for that?
I think we'd have to, I think we'd have to say so, yeah.
I think use is a very important component to this because we wouldn't necessarily want food and beverage, which I know there's some certain illegal uses in the city right now that they are utilizing food and beverages a way that people are living in the back and, you know, working in the front. I think we want to limit that. Anything that there might be some health and safety issues. I think vet clinics are great. Healthcare is great.
Those are the two.
I think I really don't know of any others that we'd want to look at, but we should definitely explore it.
Something like self-storage,
So
if you don't use it the way I use
Dan,
it.
Dan,
I've been waiting for.
Commissioner
it.
Mills,
So, okay, so I do think that it's a time use as well. So if you're not needing somebody 24 hours a day, I don't understand why. I mean, I'm a physical therapist. I could easily stuff a student into my supply room and save some money. Or put them in the back of somebody's restaurant or their dental practice or their psychiatry facility as a student to save some money. I think there's the risk of harm that just, 7-Eleven stays open 24 hours, so they make a little, spot in the back so that somebody can sleep there. That concerns me. That I don't think we want to open that Pandora's box. So I would be in favor of we restricting this, that the business necessity isn't just the nature of the business, but they need to be open 24 hours a day in order to accommodate that. That's simple. I think it's more than use. It's that the use must be
So maybe
24 hours a
they'll
day.
Provide that service 24/7, right? That's-
And I'm
Open
not
to
sure
the
with
public?
open,
Open to the public 24 hours a day?
open to the public 24 hours a day, or that the need, like in the guard shack, that the service is in necessity of being required 24 hours a day.
Like a vet
Well,
hospital
in case
or.
like
Yeah.
that, calls, that kind of fall in that. multi-
Yes, exactly. So I mean, and I mean, there may be occasions where, I mean, maybe it's a 24-hour plumbing service or something like that, where somebody's going to respond in some emergent fashion. I think there are a lot of situations there, but just simply by a particular use, I mean, the doctor's office could make that car and that call. But even, I mean, we've got vets that have added urgent care hours, but that's just 4 to 8 PM. Well, that does not need to have somebody camped out in the back of that place living there just because they stay open until 8 PM. So,
I guess to dispute that, if there was animals there 24/7, but you don't have public access 24/7. Where they would need to have caretakers, I think that might be one contingency. So I think the public access for 24 hours, there may be some pushback behind that, especially, let's just say. A vet clinic down the road that has 20 dogs in the back. They're not a boarding facility, but they just went under surgery and they're open until 8 PM. If that's the situation, they need to have somebody there 24/7 to be able to accommodate that, sleep, eat, drink, whatever needs to happen there. I think that we want to make sure that we don't restrict it to just being open to the public.
wouldn't that be swing shift? Because I mean, that's what people are doing, working in a factory, for example, and they're not accommodated in factory work. We've got hundreds of businesses in the state that are open 24 hours a day that don't provide sleeping accommodations. I mean, I think it's a unique situation. I mean, if you're at the vet clinic and you've got animals that you're caring for all night long, the emergency departments, the place where doctors are sleeping in the hospital are not in the emergency department. They are working 24 hours a day, so if that differentiation, to your point, is at what point are they, do they need to be physically there, but they're not physically working that whole entire time? I worry this is a Pandora's box.
I do have some thoughts on this too, and I don't really disagree with what's been said so far, but I do have some concerns about the tendency of government to intrude into the lives of other people. I think from the founding of our country, that's been recognized as the natural tendency of government to become more intrusive in our lives. And I don't want to play devil's advocate too much, but why do we need to intrude on this? What is the interest of our community in intruding? Maybe I'm missing something here, but why is this an issue? Why can't people do what they want with their own property? And I think there needs to be a compelling reason for government to intervene in the lives or in the personal property of citizens.
Well, I know maybe you're asking, but I would say that I think we can't, as a general rule, we don't allow residential living in commercial areas, right? Isn't that, I mean,
So that's the hazard, is that we basically have.
yeah, I mean, we have to, that's a regulation now. You can't set up living quarters, and I don't think you can in the back of Target and just have someone start living there. I mean, that's.
And I agree with that. I just think we need to have some thoughtfulness about having any kind of legislative or governmental intrusion into the lives of other people. I think there needs to be a compelling reason for it.
But I think the guidance is there now for businesses to say you can't. Well, there are some exceptions, but you can't have people living at your business full time. That's there now.
Well,
And now
I agree with that.
we're looking to say, are there some exceptions to that we need to identify?
what is the harm in having someone live at Target? Not that I'm recommending that, but
Oh, there's
what,
just
what,
so many things.
What is the public's interest in health, safety and welfare related to someone living in Target?
okay.
What is, I'm asking the same question you are. What is it?
Well, I think we need to assure those things that people are healthy and safe.
Yeah, well, I guess I haven't been very clear. I'm with you in saying if there's not a compelling reason based in one of those three things, then we should ask why we have restricted it that way. Now, this is an effort to open restrictions, so this is an effort to create fewer restrictions.
Diminish that, right?
Yeah, so just to clarify a couple of points, so if this were allowed, that would provide the city an avenue to ensure that any accommodations would be compliant with the building code, right? So right now they have this apartment above the vet clinic. They didn't get a building permit. I have no idea what the life safety situation is in that place, if it meets the fire code, if it meets the building code. This would allow us to at least say, yes, you could do this, but you have to get a permit. We have to inspect it, make sure that it's safe for the resident, but also for the city as a whole. And I think the intent really is to not open this up to Target or any other retail establishment for the businesses where it makes sense. You know, I think for any, like you were saying, anything that actually would warrant having someone on site living would work. Otherwise, we do have mixed use buildings where you can have a retail shop with apartments above. They don't have any correlation with each other. I think we also have live work units where someone could own a house and a business together. That's a separate thing. This would be strictly for an employee working at a commercial location that would warrant that type of use. So I guess one thing that I'd like to get some input on, just so we have time to talk about the water element. On the third bullet, I would probably lean towards having it only for the individual employee and not their family. Because I think that opens up another realm of, you know, how many kids do they have? How do you define family, right? That's a squishy subject. So I think it's for the employee. It's not open to the family. Regarding the business license.
May we stop on that third point?
Sure.
I'm thinking of some uses that it could be potentially an option, but like mortuaries, for example, where you might need to have different families that are staying there to accommodate to overnight needs of the businesses. And I don't know if it's permitted currently in any of the mortuaries within our city, but if there were to be an apartment above, I think we need to look at where are we restricting, what are we not restricting. I think the life safety and making sure that it is up to residential code is important. But I have some concern with us restricting who is there, because I don't know how we're going to validate that. I think if it's not abusing the business, if the business is operating and they have the discretion of who is going to be living adjacent or a part of that, they're going to make the right choice. I don't know if we need to necessarily restrict who is there and actually write code against who is there, because somebody's going to find some gray area there. So I think we just need to be careful with that.
Well, we have to define it though. I mean, we have to say whether it's just the employee or
Could we just make it a
just say
residential?
just say it's an employee occupied.
As long as health and safety is being permitted and, you know, looking at from an inspection standpoint, why does it matter?
That's a good one. Yeah.
That's
I'm
just
just-
kind of my thought process on that.
As long as we're what if you were requiring two employees to live there and they're a different gender? You know, do they have to have separate rooms? They probably ought to. And those kinds of issues. I mean, we are kind of.
No, we're not.
Blocks.
Yeah, I don't think that there should be any, personally, I don't think there should be any regulation of who is staying there, because as a business, they are going to make the business decision as to who is going to be sleeping on site. And they're not going to do something that would harm the business. And as long as the city is regulating from a safety standpoint for life and safety and making sure that building code is where it needs to be, I think that should be our responsibility. I don't think we should be implying any additional restrictions of who truly. And it could be potentially a opportunity to abuse, but I think from a land use standpoint, if we're looking at this purely land use, I don't think we should be restricting who is in certain places in the land use of a building.
So could it be a long-term rental?
I mean, I think from a
Not an
long-term-
employee of the company, is that the question?
Well, I mean, let's say they work an hour a week, so they're an employee of the company. I mean, there's a mortuary in West Valley that's been doing this for 40 years with 2 apartments over a garage. It's been a well-known fact for students and young couples. They've got 2 different apartments there. They work for, 3 hours a week or something like that, or clear the snow or whatever, and it's a long-term rental.
The county has done this in our city, at Crestwood Park. At the pool, over the pool, there was a rental. They don't now, I don't believe, but.
So I guess when it comes to like, requiring whether or not that employee has to be a full-time employee of that business or not.
How are you gonna verify that though?
So again,
This is the Pandora's box.
A lot of.
Right, I'm assuming, maybe an agreement between, the business owner provides the city stating like this is a full-time employee, I guess, outside of like requiring pay stubs, right?
It's more of an enforcement mechanism to where if there's a business that has something like this and we're getting complaints and they're abusing it, our code enforcement officers could go and say, are you a full-time employee? Can you provide evidence of that? And it's not necessarily that we'd be looking for that at the permitting phase, but they could sign a self-disclosure saying, yes, I checked this box that it's a full-time employee, kind of put the burden back on them. But at least if there's an issue, the city has a mechanism to say, okay, you're not following the code. We need to have this person leave. If it's not in here, then we don't have any teeth to enforce anything, essentially, which I guess is the nature of regulation, right?
Yeah.
If, the most simple zoning code ever is like, just don't be a jerk, but that's not
Hard to enforce.
life, right? So we've got to have all these rules, and so it's a tricky thing to balance, but I think just based on the conversation, we've got some direction as to how we can tweak this and bring it back. See if you guys have additional comments.
Do you have any proposed use charts for permitted or conditional? As far as what could be permitted and what would be conditional on this?
We don't yet, yeah, I don't know if you guys have any suggestions.
Yeah, let's see what others are
Seems
doing.
like- Okay,
And I think that could be an interesting way where we don't have to have any requirements of the employment status, but permitted use could be certain cases where it would be healthcare or veterinary care. Everything, and I'm just spitballing here, but everything else would be a conditional use where we could then say, all right, we have a 7-Eleven, for example. And the 7-Eleven has a extra space in the back that fits. And I don't know if this would even be a situation, but we then have a conditional use that, yes, that can be a residential space, but we need that to be a full-time employee and we need to have proof of employment.
Yeah, we can explore options like that. We'll just have to think more on how that might look.
It seems difficult to me to have a permitted use, which is going to be zone-based, that depends on what you use the building for.
Well, then it would be an accessory use to this list of principal uses.
So what I'm saying is a doctor's office or a veterinary clinic is in some zone.
Right.
They're permitted to be a veterinary clinic. How do you say, because they chose to do that with the building, they are allowed to have someone sleep in the back? As opposed, the use of the building being the trigger to that is
Right.
tricky.
Yeah, but that's common for a lot of things in regulation. So it's just the way that we craft the language to allow that. The trick would be if the vet clinic moves out and, if T-Mobile wants to move in, now there's an established apartment, how do we handle that change of use if we've already approved it, you know, that's more of a challenge of that type of thing. Do we make them get a permit to rip it out? Do we allow them to continue renting it to some other third party? So those are things that we can think through to see how that could look. So I'll come back, but good thoughts, good ideas. You want to join us, Sam?
Yeah.
So Sam is joining us from Landmark. I don't know if you were here in person last time. I guess you were backpacking and Mark was on
Yeah,
for
had some,
planning commission,
had
but
some trouble getting consistency with our staff here at these
no, that's
meetings, and I apologize for that.
But Sam's joining us from Landmark Design. He's our lead consultant on the general plan effort, and him and his team have done a great job of getting this thing ready to go. So I'll just turn over to you, Sam, and you can walk through whatever.
Yeah.
got.
Do I have a way to share?
So if you join the Zoom meeting, you can share your screen.
Join the Zoom meeting. I don't know that I
Yeah.
have a link for the Zoom meeting.
Let me send it to you.
Has everyone received a copy of the draft?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
good.
right.
That's huge. Okay. So I had intended to just kind of give a very brief walkthrough of the draft for the benefit of everybody. But if you've read it, that helps. So let's see. Coming through.
Yeah, sorry, it's just. Okay, should have it. Yeah, and we did last night go through the vision statement and goals.
Yeah.
At a high level. I mean, we didn't get into the details, but I think everything in there made sense. Just there were a couple of questions about the city's responsibility of making sure that water is accessible to residents, even though we're not necessarily the provider. I don't really know if and how that makes its way in the general plan, or if it's just a general city responsibility, you know.
And I
But
guess,
I guess that was probably the only topic that came up that was maybe worth talking a little bit more about.
yeah, I'd like to hear the group elaborate on that a bit more.
Was there anything else that we talked about last night regarding the water element that we need to go over?
I just had a few thoughts, but.
Yeah.
But we can, should I dive in?
Yeah.
Go ahead, okay. There's a statement, there's a sentence in the mission statement about we being Cottonwood Heights committed to protecting the watershed. What can we do as a city to protect the watershed? Because this goes back to what you were talking about we don't own the water. We can do conservation things and all.
This seems like a politically loaded phrase to me. That might be talking about some political topics that have nothing to do with water use in the city.
Yeah, so the watershed, I mean, we've got two of the major streams or creeks that flow into the
Right.
Great Salt Lake and provide water to really the whole region. So that would be more for ensuring that there's safeguards in place to avoid pollution.
Like a
with-
riparian.
Yeah, so like riparian things to make sure that our development standards aren't harming the water. Stormwater practices where, you know, you have bioswales or other ways to filtrate water before it enters the water system.
Okay,
So that's more of what it means to protect the watershed. And then there's other things too with, you know, not paving the entire city so that water can percolate into the ground, recharge aquifers, filtrate water.
Is there
So a lot of things like that.
any thought about maintaining or improving the stream beds for Little Cottonwood and Big Cottonwood Creeks?
So that would all probably fall under the Army Corps of Engineers
So
jurisdiction.
we
I
don't have
mean,
any anything to do about that?
Oh, okay.
Probably not, because that's all like FEMA regulated, Army Corps, that's all a very different animal,
Well,
even
my
the state.
understanding is they used to come through those stream beds and clean them up. And I mean, that would be taking care of the watershed.
Yeah, it'd probably be like the Department of Environmental Quality. Honestly, there's probably like 12 different agencies that would have their hands in that. I don't know if that's something necessarily the city would want to get involved in, but we could certainly facilitate or allow that
Being aware
stuff,
of
but
the need of these.
I think it's more the controls on the private land around the water and where the water is flowing into that we have more say in what types of land uses are allowed, what types of development standards are in place to help protect and clean water before it enters the.
When I read this, my mind immediately went to something unrelated to any of what you said, which was the gondola.
Mm.
So if you didn't use the word shed there and use the word resources or something else, I think it might take some of the political weight out of it.
Yeah, I guess, Sam, do you want to weigh in on that term?
Yeah,
And what your thoughts were?
I think, when we used the term watershed here, I don't think we were intending to talk about. Yeah, the way you're saying,
The canyons.
the canyons per se, as much as you are part of like water is a regional issue. Right? It's not self-contained within Cottonwood Heights. And so your water as a source, as a resource is a regional sort of thing. And so protecting it as a future source available to you is kind of what we're getting at here, I guess. And making sure that you are not over, because this section is about water use in particular. That you're not over consuming from that water supply and jeopardizing it.
I just
You know?
would say if you change the word shed to something else that is in line with that, it would help me feel better about it.
Yeah. I think that there is a component, and this is kind of a confusing bit here. You know, there's some significant overlap that could be had between the water use element and the environment element of the general plan. And, you know, where you have the conversation about water quality and stormwater management, you know, is kind of, it's great,
One or the other.
right? So, but the specific goals that the state has for this element are to discuss water as a resource for, you know, and how you're consuming that. So. Right.
So that's one of the questions that I've got is how do you quantify what you're using as a city? If you look at issues throughout the state, there is no statewide formula that I'm aware of as how you quantify it. So there's a residential component, there's an institutional component. You've got churches and schools, which to my knowledge don't pay for their water, so they just kind of water willy-nilly. You have businesses, you have commercial, and then you have industrial uses of water. And this is just talking generally statewide. I don't think that we have a real industrial usage here in the city. But what do you then put in your formula so that you know how much you're using as a resident?
Right.
If you put those lumped together, I mean, the figure that I looked at that was quite astounding is that Wayne County's, which is a rural county, the water use per capita that they report is 900 gallons a day. So I doubt that I use 900 gallons a week doing what I do residentially. Yet how are we quantifying our per capita use in Cottonwood Heights and everybody else so that we know if we're equal, if we're not? Right now it's apples to oranges. So they have no idea how our is put together. So how do we know that we're improving by the residential? Because that's probably our biggest ability to make an impact on water usage. But how is that in this?
And that's the real challenge. So if Cottonwood Heights was in charge of its own water, might be a bit of a different story. Some of the other municipalities we've worked with, they have the data readily accessible to be able to monitor who the water users are and how, and see changes in their habits. That data is not really being shared actively, to my knowledge, with the city from Salt Lake Public Utilities. They likely have it, but they haven't parsed things out for Cottonwood Heights specifically. They're just kind of, all the customers are in a pool. So, so Salt Lake Public Utilities has a goal to basically reduce their per capita water use within for their customer base by 20%. And that's, so if that's something that, you know, Cottonwood Heights as a customer can get behind, you know, the things that are going to drive that are going to be incremental things here and there. It's going to be really hard to measure their effectiveness unless you can get that data from the public utility and start connecting the dots, essentially.
Well, my question still becomes, how do you quantify that?
Yeah.
You've got to, if you're gonna do residential impact, you know, I turn the water off while I'm brushing my teeth and blah, blah, blah. That's residential. But if the figures that you're basing how Cottonwood Heights is doing includes commercial and includes whatever industrial you've got and institutional, then whatever we're doing as an individual, as a resident, may be just blotted out, or is so infinitesimally small that you can't even track it because of the other usage are greater. So I don't understand from what we have here, how we can even quantify how we're doing. You want to reduce it by 20%. How do I know if we're
We
reducing
don't
by
know.
20%? Well,
That's the
my
problem.
point.
That's the problem.
The truth is so that you may know,
How would I know?
Your bill.
because you have a bill.
Your
You have a
individual
bill.
bill, may tell you.
Yeah, the trick is that we don't, Salt Lake Public Utilities may have that data broken down by land use, by user, by type. They just haven't shared that information with us. We've asked for it, but we just don't have that access to that data. But the challenge is the state law requires that we have this element in our plan. Even though we don't have the data, they say, we're not going to accept this plan unless you have a specific number of reduction. Is that right, Sam, that this is a thing that the state forces us to have? Even though we don't have good data, we just have to give them something to say, like, it's kind of meaningless, but it's in there to check the box.
Now, where do we get the data that we have? Because there is some reference in this plan that with data, and it seems like there's some assumptions being made, but where are we getting that data? Is that all from Salt Lake Public Utilities?
So Salt Lake Public Utilities has a new master plan in draft form. It hasn't been formally adopted yet, and that's where we pulled those numbers from most recently. We did not include those numbers in previous iterations of this draft because they weren't even available. But the state encouraged us to go back and try and find some sort of projection that you're headed towards.
So with figure 6.3, it shows, what is it, 179 GPCD trajectory, and we're looking to reduce to 146. Is that just pulled out of the ether, or where do we get that specific?
So the 146 is a goal that the public utility has to reach for their per capita usage. And we did some extrapolation based on your population and your expected population growth to sort of figure out where you would be headed if you continued your per capita rate and added that extra growth on versus versus targeting the 146 that they're looking for. So
Or they get
it's
the 146?
I don't fully know.
So there's a breakdown. So for their whole usage, 53% is residential, commercial 23%, institutional 18%, and industrial 6%. What if we just take their whole system and we extrapolate that for Cottonwood Heights? That data is available. And we just say, well, we can't get granular about Cottonwood Heights, but we can say for their entire system, let's set specific goals, what the residential is going to do and what these other categories are going to do, so that we can have realistic expectations. To Commissioner Polson's point, I mean, if they're not going to give us our granular data, that's their system wide, and I don't know that we're gonna be that far off in terms of our uses. This doesn't include agricultural, which is the rest of the state, so we're not gonna be comparing. It's just Salt Lake City public water, so,
Well,
and that's in their data.
Most of the county.
2 points. One is that 13% of Salt Lake County is agricultural of the land. None of it's in here, but in the western part of the valley. And the second is that residential usage statewide is really a function of your land, of your property size of the house that you have on. And so if you're in an apartment, you don't have any water. And this is to your point, is your bill. If I have more property than you, my water bill is going to be bigger. And in the summer, I'm going to bury my not brushing my teeth with the water going, watering my yard. And so even that's very variable. The math and all this stuff just befuddles me.
Let me give you one thing that might be helpful here. I think I was on this committee, and one of the things that we said is that we don't want to be in a position where we mandate reductions of water. That's not where the city sees itself as playing a role, but facilitates the education of water use, which means it's going to come down to individuals and businesses to make the effort if they choose to do that based on the education. And so their reporting on themselves in their effort to do better is really where it all comes out.
But how do
The city can't,
Yeah, there's no mandate.
the city is not going to force any of these things to happen. They're just going to educate. And then individuals are going to say, hey, look, I know what I can look at, my bill, and I know that I have a goal personally to cut 20%. I know all the data I need to do that.
Yeah, the challenge is that there's not a way for the city to track those metrics to give ourselves a pat on the back. We
Yeah.
say we've reduced it by 80%, so we're exceeding that goal. We don't have the data to do that, but we can at least help contribute to the overall.
Right, and there are
collective
things the city is already
Sure.
has in place with ordinances in terms of new build, certain percentages. Of
And the city's water use itself is significant. The city uses a lot of water. And so
Mhm.
for the city to manage its own bill is also part of what we're
Good point,
talking about here.
Yeah, and we could track those. I mean, we get water bills just like everyone else, so we can track that for the city-owned property because we get the information. It's just tougher to track citywide for everybody.
So to go deeper on what you had communicated, it sounds like this is encouragement of education purely, not necessarily any type of enforcement.
Yeah.
It's just education. And I think from an education standpoint, I think something we need to put a note in is to get real data so that we can educate concisely as far as here's where we are at as a city, here's where we need to be as a city for longevity, and encourage that based on these practices, because if we don't have that data, it's pretty difficult. But I think for the efforts of what we have to do for state compliance, as well as continuing to refine this for the general plan, I think that, I mean, as an education piece, this might be a good guideline for us to continue to refine. Will we have opportunity after we submit this to make changes?
Yeah.
In our general plan?
Yeah.
Modifications?
Yeah.
Okay.
Always.
Yeah, you always have that option, so. Yeah, so. And I think that this discussion is a good one in that, yeah, you like actually hitting the number. I don't think that's like the goal of, like, that's not the role of the city to hit that number. That's a target that's been established by the public utility for their whole system, right? You as Cottonwood Heights, you may be an outlier in that, right? You might like I think there are going to be pockets within the city, but also within just the whole service area that are going to be higher users than other pockets will, just by nature of the property sizes, who lives there, whether they care, right?
I think another point to that, though, is that the utility itself in a new billing structure is trying to address the same issue.
Right.
They're trying to get people to pay attention by charging them a lot more money if they use
Yes,
a lot of water.
yes,
And so they're doing their part by making it painful.
And I think that as time goes on, they may also resort to other ways to favor those who are using less water.
Yeah.
In the same way that the electric and the gas companies have done, right? There are numerous rebates and incentives that have been thrown out there over time, so.
And one of the observations that I've made is, we do pay a higher rate for the water that we receive than if we were living in Salt Lake by quite a bit.
Yep.
It'd be nice if some of that money could be utilized to make sure that our water pipes are up to snuff. It's really frustrating for me that there are discussions like this, and then go home and see a bunch of water just running down the road because somebody's pipe is broken. I don't know if there's a way to anticipate that or look at which pipes might be ready to break and be ready to replace them as quickly as possible or something. But there's a lot of water that gets wasted because of poor
Infrastructure.
Yeah.
That's their argument right now. That's why they've done it. And the claim is that Salt Lake City has cleaned their own house, and that the way that they've leveraged all these other bedroom communities is because they're claiming it's to pay for aging infrastructure. So they're claiming that it's like, they're claiming that they are. They're claiming that because of pipe breakages and things like that, that are happening at a higher rate in Cottonwood Heights than they were before. I don't know if I agree with their math, but that's the argument. We'll see if they actually do it, so.
I have a thought here as well. It's outside of our scope altogether, I suspect, but the way we as a city decided to buy water, and those of you who were there yesterday, I brought this up kind of to tee this idea up. We are not represented in any significant form in the conversation about how our water is managed. And the idea came up yesterday. It's kind of like the power company. Our water situation is a lot like Rocky Mountain Power. The major difference is that Rocky Mountain Power is a regulated monopoly, and you have a public service commission. Salt Lake City Water is an unregulated, I presume, monopoly. And I think there is an effort there to go after regulating them. If they're going to be a monopoly, regulating them in the same way you do other similar monopolies, and the city could get a stake in that conversation. It's a legislative walk. It's not an easy place to get to, but it's the kind of walk in our history we've done. We did it with school districts. We did it, with all kinds of things, and it's probably a worthy conversation.
Yeah, having a seat at the table is.
Yeah. Today, nobody except the city council has a seat at the table. And none of us have a vote in that body. So.
Well, we talked about that yesterday, that the city council didn't even feel represented. We have one representative that lives in Cottonwood Heights that is actually on that board. And he's been doing that job for a long time. But he is our voice for Cottonwood Heights. At least that's what I got out of the conversation yesterday. Did I miss something?
No, that's true. That body, though, has little to no authority. It's my understanding that he is on.
Yeah, but your point's well taken. Incredibly well taken. Is we've got all this that we're supposed to meet, and we have no representation saying, is this realistic? Can we actually do it? But it probably would take some legislation or some real backroom bartering to get somebody that's an elected official in Cottonwood Heights or some bodies on that commission so that we actually have a voice in what we are put up with there. And I don't know how we get there other than probably legislatively.
That's how you get a school district split. That's how you get a lot of things that we've done over our history.
In your committee meeting on this, did you discuss anything to that regards?
Yes.
We did.
We did briefly.
Is there any room in the general plan for us to create a goal to construct something like that?
It's right here. It's in what's in front of us right now. If you're gonna talk about the topic as a goal, here's where you would do it. And that's why I bring that.
Well, and that's where I'm thinking is. From that standpoint, it might be worthwhile if we could find some,
You could make that a very specific strategy.
absolutely, I think. His point
Got
is
some
very
language
good.
in here that hints towards that direction of increasing collaboration with the utility, but if you wanted to get that specific, you could.
We'll see, in my mind, it's just clearing space so that there are staff resources and city resources that are freed up so that there's, whether it's FTEs or time. And also just a mandate to our city council so that there's space to get this done. So whatever language needs to happen, I don't know if general plan is the right place for this or not. I defer to staff on that, but
That's probably the only place.
then let's
Hmm.
write it.
Yeah, and I guess too, it depends on what's the time frame for that type of a goal? Because I mean, we're looking out, I don't know what the long-term,
5 to 10 years.
so is that something that we're wanting to tackle now? I mean, we can at least mention it, but it's stuff like that will take a long time. So if that's kind of the end goal, we need to start those efforts sooner than later.
Yeah.
But again, I think it comes back to how committed is the city really with the trade-offs it's gonna be and the time and resources and energy to make it happen, right? There's a lot of other stuff in the whole general plan that's also very valid.
Yeah.
So,
And demanding.
sure.
Yeah, they're all very demanding.
Should we
Well,
move into
I
the other
think we-
room and?
Yeah.
I'm gonna make a motion
Absolutely.
to adjourn this one.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Thank you.